Aarav Malhotra and Priya Kapoor looked like the perfect newlyweds, but behind the glittering wedding in Sydney was a $50 million scam. And within hours of saying, "I do," one of them would end up dead, while the other vanished into a mystery that still haunts investigators. In 2019, the story of Aarav Malhotra and Priya Kapoor captured attention across two continents. Aarav was widely known in Mumbai's social circles as a rising star in business. His family claimed he had built a thriving real estate empire in Australia, turning neglected properties into luxury developments. He was polished, ambitious, and spoke with the confidence of someone destined for wealth and power. Priya, on the other hand, belonged to an old money family in Delhi. Her father's jewelry business had supplied ornaments to elite clients for decades, and she grew up surrounded by privilege, etiquette lessons, and a reputation for grace that made her a prized bride. When the two families arranged their marriage, it seemed like a union designed not only to strengthen wealth, but to cement status within the diaspora community. The wedding celebrations themselves were the kind that become folklore. Guests flew in from London, Dubai, and Singapore. The venue in Sydney was draped in gold and ivory silks, with imported flowers flown in at a cost that could have funded an entire neighborhood. Newspapers praised the ceremony as a fusion of tradition and modern luxury, while glossy magazines featured the couple smiling under chandeliers, their outfits shimmering with hand-embroidered jewels. To their guests, they were the picture of success, two young people born into wealth, joining forces to build an even bigger empire abroad. But what no one could see behind the diamond necklaces and tailored suits was how carefully orchestrated the facade truly was. Aarav's business empire wasn't as vast as it appeared. Loans hung over his companies like storm clouds. Priya wasn't simply a bride basking in the glow of tradition. She was already thinking ahead, calculating possibilities that went far beyond a conventional marriage. For the crowd cheering them that night, it was a fairy tale. For Aarav and Priya, it was the first step in a game worth millions. Aarav's carefully crafted image of success hid a far more fragile reality. While he flaunted luxury cars and penthouse apartments, his real estate projects were suffocating under enormous debt. Banks in India had started to refuse him new credit lines, and whispers in business circles suggested that his fortune might not survive another year. Priya, who had been raised among jewels and wealth, discovered this truth soon after their engagement. Instead of confronting him or walking away, she made a decision that would bind them together in a way far more dangerous than marriage itself. She saw his desperation not as a weakness, but as an opportunity. The plan they built together was bold, almost cinematic. Using their newly married status as a trusted couple from respected families, they presented themselves as the gatekeepers to exclusive investment opportunities in Sydney's booming property market. They created glossy brochures, staged meetings in high-end hotels, and even hired financial experts to add credibility to their scheme. To potential investors, they were not just newlyweds, but visionaries who could double fortunes. They targeted members of Sydney's wealthy Indian community, knowing cultural ties and shared heritage would make their promises even more convincing. The money poured in quickly. Doctors, business owners, and family friends transferred funds, eager not to miss the chance of being part of what seemed like a golden investment. Over 12 months, the couple funneled nearly $50 million into accounts spread across offshore tax havens, each layer making the money harder to trace. The couple became symbols of prosperity, praised for blending romance and business with effortless charm. Yet every photograph of them at charity galas, every smile at family gatherings, hid the truth. Their marriage was nothing more than a stage, and their greatest love was the scam they had set in motion. The flood of money should have brought Aarav and Priya closer, but instead it created cracks that widened with every passing week. Their penthouse overlooking Sydney Harbor became less a home and more a battlefield of silent suspicion. Priya noticed things that unsettled her. Accounts in the Cayman Islands listed only in Aarav's name, late-night messages he quickly deleted, and private meetings with lawyers she had never met. At first, she brushed it aside, convincing herself it was just part of the cover they had built together. But the nagging thought wouldn't leave her. What if Aarav intended to keep the entire fortune for himself and abandon her once the scam was complete? Aarav, meanwhile, grew increasingly paranoid about Priya's loyalty. Her calm, composed exterior made him wonder what she was hiding. He saw her taking long phone calls and hushed tones, spending unexplained afternoons away, and handling documents he had never approved. The possibility that Priya might betray him to save herself began to take root in his mind. Every smile from her seemed rehearsed, every touch calculated. The glamorous couple admired by outsiders were, behind closed doors, two predators circling each other. Their lifestyle only fueled the tension. Extravagant parties and designer shopping trips kept up appearances, but in private, the atmosphere was suffocating. They barely spoke during meals, and when they did, it was laced with veiled accusations and mistrust. What had started as a partnership in crime was dissolving into a contest of survival. Both knew that if one of them lost control of the scheme, the other would be the first to strike. What neither realized was that their scam, no matter how carefully designed, was built on a foundation of greed and deceit that could not hold forever. The collapse had already begun. The wedding reception in Sydney was meant to be the pinnacle of their carefully crafted image. Hundreds of guests gathered in a ballroom shimmering with crystal chandeliers and overflowing with roses. The celebration stretched late into the night, with music, laughter, and endless champagne. For the public eye, it was a fairy tale. For Aarav and Priya, it was the closing act of their performance. By then, authorities had begun circling. Investors were demanding payouts, and accountants were raising questions about missing funds. The couple had decided this night would mark the turning point, move the money overseas, disappear, and reinvent themselves far from Sydney. But as the last guests left and the music faded, their story veered into something no one could have imagined. When hotel staff entered the bridal suite the following morning, they discovered a scene of horror. Priya lay motionless across the satin-covered bed, her silk wedding sash wound tightly around her neck. The extravagant jewelry she had worn hours earlier was still in place, glinting against lifeless skin. The room itself showed no sign of forced entry. There was no shattered glass, no overturned furniture, only silence heavy enough to smother the air. To the outside world, the glamorous bride of the year had been murdered on the very night she was meant to begin a new life. The brutality and timing shocked everyone who heard the news. Whispers spread quickly. Was it a jealous lover, a vengeful associate, or a simple robbery gone wrong? Yet investigators noticed what others overlooked. Nothing of value had been taken. Her diamond necklace still gleamed under the lights. The sash used as a weapon had belonged to her own wedding attire. Whoever had done this had acted with purpose, not desperation. The fairy tale union had ended in a crime scene, and suspicion was about to shift in a direction no one expected. The investigation into Priya's death quickly shifted from the initial theories of jealousy or robbery to something far more complex. Detectives combed through the couple's financial records and uncovered a web of offshore transfers that painted a disturbing picture. Millions had been moved in the weeks leading up to the wedding, with accounts traced to secretive havens across the Caribbean and Southeast Asia. The scale of the fraud was undeniable, and at the center of it all was Aarav. But as police prepared to bring him in for questioning, they discovered something startling. He was already gone. Surveillance footage from the hotel revealed Aarav leaving the bridal suite in the early hours of the morning. Dressed in a dark suit, he carried a single suitcase and moved quickly through the lobby, avoiding the gaze of staff. When investigators intercepted the luggage days later at a storage unit linked to him, they found a chilling collection, bundles of cash, gold bars, multiple passports under different names, and plane tickets to destinations across Asia. To authorities, it looked like the perfect escape kit, suggesting a man ready to vanish with the entire fortune. The evidence pointed toward one conclusion. Aarav had silenced his wife to claim everything for himself. But the case refused to fit neatly together. Forensic experts found traces of sedatives in Aarav's own champagne glass from the reception, raising doubts about his ability to commit the murder. If he had been drugged, how could he have strangled Priya in such a calculated manner? The contradictions deepened when staff recalled seeing Priya and Aarav arguing quietly before midnight, her voice low but tense. The narrative of a greedy husband killing his bride began to unravel, leaving investigators to wonder if Aarav was the true mastermind, or merely another pawn in a much larger scheme. Months after the shocking wedding night, the case took an even darker turn. Aarav, who had vanished from Sydney under a cloud of suspicion, was found dead on the shores of Bali. His body bore deep slashes across the throat, the kind of wounds that spoke of execution rather than random violence. The suitcase he had taken from the hotel was missing, along with the gold, cash, and forged passports. For a moment, it seemed as though his attempt to escape with the stolen fortune had ended in betrayal at the hands of criminals he had trusted. But as Interpol and Australian authorities pieced together the fragments, a more disturbing truth began to surface. Investigators traced parts of the stolen money to hidden accounts in Europe. These accounts were not linked to Aarav at all, but to identities later connected to Priya. It was a revelation that stunned the case wide open. Priya had not only known of Aarav's plan to escape, but had constructed her own scheme within the scam itself, carefully siphoning funds into places he could never access. Even more shocking was the discovery that the woman found dead in the Sydney bridal suite was not Priya at all. DNA tests revealed she was a hired lookalike, someone Priya had paid to take her place in death. The murder in the hotel room had been staged with precision to frame Aarav as both a killer and a thief, allowing Priya to vanish unnoticed. By the time Aarav realized the trap, it was already too late. Alone in Bali, he was cornered and eliminated, his death serving as the final loose end tied up by Priya's mysterious accomplices. To this day, Priya has never been located. Some believe she lives in Europe under a new identity, protected by the millions she orchestrated to steal. Others think she may have vanished even deeper, leaving no trace at all. What remains is a chilling story of greed, betrayal, and the perfect crime that turned marriage into murder. Aarav Malhotra and Priya Kapoor looked like the perfect newlyweds, but behind the glittering wedding in Sydney was a $50 million scam. And within hours of saying, "I do," one of them would end up dead, while the other vanished into a mystery that still haunts investigators.